The day was nearing noon, and sunlight streamed through the grand iron gates of Buckingham Palace, casting sharp reflections across the stone courtyard. Under the summer sun, the faces of the visitors were glowing, but their excitement burned even hotter than the sunlight itself. Standing before the palace felt like touching the very heart of history. Cameras clicked in a restless rhythm, children's joyful screams echoed off the stone, and yet, against all this chaos, the royal guards stood like immovable pillars, steadfast in their magnificent uniforms, unflinching in their duty. For David Ashford, the guard on duty that day, it had begun like any ordinary day. His scarlet uniform and tall black bearskin hat were far more than just ceremonial dress. He was a man forged in fire, a veteran with 10 years in the British Army, battle-hardened in the searing heat of Afghanistan, a man who had seen brothers fall on the front lines. Now, his battlefield was the front of Buckingham Palace, where what many tourists saw as mere pageantry was to him a living symbol of his nation's pride. Each morning, he prepared his uniform with military precision, polishing every button, standing ready not as a performer, but as a guardian sworn to his oath. Most tourists showed respect. Some joked quietly among themselves, others waved politely with their children in tow, but now and then there were exceptions. David had seen them all, the mockers, the ones who pushed limits for the perfect photo. None of it fazed him anymore. But what happened that day went far beyond anything routine. Around 3 in the afternoon, a ripple of tension spread through the crowd. Voices rose in sudden alarm, and eyes turned toward a single point. A wiry man pushed through the throng, a defiant look in his eye as he made his way forward. Clutching tightly onto his hand was a small child. The man's face bore a twisted mix of fury and drunken haze, his eyes bloodshot, sweat pouring down his cheeks. The child, trembling beside him, darted nervous glances, unsure of what was about to unfold. From the murmurs in the crowd, it seemed the man had already sparked an argument along the way, his temper spiraling out of control. But now, he had chosen a target. Among the visitors, a young child had slipped from his mother's grasp and stepped slightly ahead, gazing at the palace with innocent curiosity. Suddenly, the man lunged toward the child. Shouting as he took heavy steps, he clamped a harsh hand down on the boy's shoulder. The mother's scream pierced through the crowd like a siren. The entire courtyard froze. Shock swept across the faces of the onlookers as they watched this unthinkable scene unfold. Some backed away in fear, others looked at each other in helpless confusion. The man grabbed at the child's arm, shaking him roughly. The boy squeezed his eyes shut in terror, and in that moment, everything changed. Ashford, who until then had stood like a stone, sprang into action. His eyes, sharpened by years of training, locked onto the threat. Everything he had been taught, every drill and instinct, came alive within him. Threat identified. Civilian in danger. Intervention required. His boots hit the courtyard stones with a resounding authority as he moved forward, each step echoing through the stunned silence. The crowd held its breath. Like parting waves, the people cleared a path for him. In an instant, he emerged at the center of the chaos, a storm in scarlet. Just as the man reached to seize the child again, Ashford commanded, his voice firm and thunderous, "Sir, stop, release the child." The man turned, blinking in drunken defiance, trying to summon courage from the haze of alcohol. "You can't tell me what to do," he roared, his grip still tight around the child's arm. What had begun as reckless words had escalated into physical threat. Ashford didn't hesitate. Without a flicker of doubt, he advanced. The crowd recoiled, a woman's phone slipping from her trembling hand and clattering to the ground. With precision and force, Ashford seized the man's wrist, twisting it skillfully. A cry of pain escaped the man's lips as he was forced to let go of the child. The boy bolted back to his mother, who swept him into her arms, tears streaking down her face. As the man collapsed to his knees, Ashford kept him firmly pinned. Palace security surged through the crowd, moving in swiftly to take control. As they handcuffed the man behind his back, a wave of applause rose from the crowd. Some were still frozen in disbelief. Others had their phones raised high, capturing the heroic moment to relive again and again. But for Ashford, none of that mattered. He had done his duty. He had protected the innocent, and in that instant, he had shown the world that the royal guards were far more than just ceremonial figures. In his eyes burned a single truth, unshakable devotion to his duty. Somewhere in the crowd, a man murmured under his breath, "That's what a real guard looks like." And that day, everyone gathered at the palace was reminded once more that these scarlet uniforms stand not only for tradition but for the protection of human dignity and the safety of all. That day, in the middle of that restless crowd, everyone present witnessed firsthand what it truly means when a royal guard steps in to defend the innocent. It was a bright spring afternoon, and the sun bathed the square in warm light. Families, tourists, and curious onlookers flocked to the gates of Buckingham Palace, where the changing of the guard was about to begin. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, eager to catch a glimpse of the ceremony, while cameras clicked and recorded every detail of the historic scene. Among the crowd, a little boy with curly hair and wide eyes stood tightly gripping his mother's hand. His name was Oliver, barely 7 years old, and this was his first trip to London. He wore a tiny Union Jack cap and carried a toy soldier in his pocket, completely mesmerized by the guards in their red uniforms and tall bearskin hats. Everything seemed perfect until a disturbance rippled through the crowd. From the far side of the square, an aggressive man began pushing his way forward. He was in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered, wearing a rumpled gray jacket, and his face was flushed from both the heat and, most likely, alcohol. He shouted incoherent words, eyes wild with frustration. People tried to move aside, pulling their children away, but the man was determined. His gaze locked onto little Oliver, who had wandered a few steps ahead, fascinated by the marching guards. The man suddenly lunged at the child. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Oliver's mother screamed, but it was too late. His tiny legs couldn't carry him away fast enough. And that's when it happened. Like thunder breaking the calm of the day, the sharp stomp of a royal guard's boot split the air. Guard Edward Hartley, a seasoned veteran with years of service, broke formation and stepped forward without hesitation. His polished bayonet gleamed in the sunlight as he positioned himself between the man and the child. "Step back, sir," Hartley's voice boomed with commanding authority, cutting through the chaos like a blade. The attacker, stunned by the unexpected intervention, froze mid-stride. For a brief moment, the entire square fell silent. You could hear the distant calls of seagulls, the fluttering flags, even the boy's frightened breathing. But the man's rage hadn't subsided. He snarled, "Out of my way," and tried to shove past the guard. What followed happened in mere seconds, but felt like an eternity. With the precision of a soldier trained for the battlefield, Hartley shifted his stance, using his full weight to block the assailant. His posture was unbreakable, forged by years of discipline and drills. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. Instead, he commanded once more, louder, firmer. "I said, step back." This time, there was no mistaking the tone. It wasn't just a command, it was a warning. Palace security had already begun rushing toward the scene, but Hartley held the line. Protecting the child had become his sole mission. The man, realizing he wouldn't get past this living wall of iron will, let out a frustrated roar and swung his arm in a wild attempt to push the guard aside. Big mistake. With a swift, practiced motion, Guard Hartley sidestepped the blow, catching the man's arm and pinning it against his back. In a single fluid move, he forced the attacker down to his knees, neutralizing the threat without excessive force. Cheers and applause erupted from the crowd as the man, now subdued, could do nothing but glare helplessly at the ground. From that day forward, those who were there would forever tell the story of the brave royal guard who stood not just for ceremony, but for protection, for honor, and for the safety of the innocent. Because sometimes, being a hero doesn't require a battlefield, it only requires the courage to step forward when it matters most.